Doesn't mean that Hillary would have been a good choice either. She was a terrible choice.
We should be, in my view, repealing something called Section 230, which gave platforms on the internet immunity because they were thought to be just pass-throughs, that they shouldn't be judged for the content that is posted.
She's a corrupt politician, one of the most unlikable people that's ever run for office.
We now know that that was an overly simple view.
They were trying to get people to be supporting her just because she's a woman.
Platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter X, Instagram or TikTok, whatever they are, if they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control.
This is going to be her history. Women, ladies, I stand with her.
And it's not just the social and psychological effects, it's real harm.
So there's all these women that have this blind allegiance towards this career politician, completely full of shit. She's been full of shit forever.
She thought the applause would drown out the critics. Instead, she got scorched by a podcast mic. Hillary Clinton, former First Lady, Secretary of State, and two-time presidential candidate, just got eviscerated by Joe Rogan in front of millions. No camera crew, no CNN filter. Just Rogan, a blunt microphone, and zero patience for the polished lies of Washington. This wasn't just a political critique, it was a verbal demolition. Rogan accused her of being a manufactured candidate, a walking brand built by donors and lobbyists, propped up by identity politics and Wall Street cash. And the worst part? He said everyone saw it, except her. No softballs, no political politeness. Rogan called her out as one of the most out-of-touch political figures in modern history. The kind of politician who thinks charisma can be copy-pasted and scandals can be wiped clean. Literally. But this was just the beginning. Because once he opened that door, Rogan walked straight into the part Hillary hoped the world would forget.
He is, and he's actually still kind of good looking. Like, even for an older dude, yeah, why not? He's still so good looking, and she's just so miserable.
She was publicly humiliated, and she thought that her big retribution would become president.
I'm running for president, and I'm in it to win it.
You know, become president.
Sure.
And then that would be it. All water under the bridge. I'm a strong woman. I'm running this country.
Joe Rogan didn't just question Hillary's politics, he followed the money. And when he got to the Clinton Foundation, things got dark. Real dark. He painted it as less of a charity and more of a global cash funnel, a nonprofit that seemed to profit every time Hillary's power surged. He pointed out the timing. Donations from foreign governments spiked when she was Secretary of State, then mysteriously dried up after she lost the election. What kind of charity sees its donations evaporate the moment someone loses power? Rogan had a theory, because it was never about charity. It was about access. He called out the million-dollar speeches to Wall Street, the secret donor lists, the backroom deals camouflaged as global outreach. And while Hillary positioned herself as a champion of the poor, Rogan questioned how her family foundation looked more like a hedge fund with better PR. The implication? Influence was for sale, and the foundation was the storefront. But that wasn't the only ghost Hillary tried to bury, because right behind the donations were the emails.
The thing was, he was packing stadiums.
Yeah.
She couldn't even fill a fucking high school gymnasium.
Right. She was pulling all the strings, and she had all the favors that she was pulling in, and she had a shit ton of money behind her, and they were completely arrogant, and all the liberal elite in the media thought there was no chance that she was going to lose. She's 95% shoe-in to win the presidency, and she walked around like she was 95%.
She already thought she won.
Yeah.
But Joe Rogan didn't hold back. When the topic of Hillary's infamous private email server came up, he practically laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. A former Secretary of State conducting official business on a private server in her basement? Rogan called it what it was: recklessness wrapped in arrogance. Then came the punchline. She deleted 33,000 emails. He repeated it like a mantra, mocking how casually the media brushed it off. If a regular citizen did that, they'd be in jail. But Hillary, she got a press tour. Rogan ripped into the hypocrisy. The same political class that screams about accountability let Hillary slide with excuses like, "I didn't know it was classified," or "it was about yoga." He called it the greatest digital cover-up of the 21st century. And somehow, she spun it into a victim story. To Rogan, the emails weren't just a scandal, they were a symbol. A reminder that for people like Hillary, the rules are optional, that accountability only exists for the rest of us. And just when you think that's the bottom, there's Benghazi. Rogan didn't tiptoe around Benghazi. He hit it head on. 4 Americans died, and Hillary Clinton dodged the blame like it was sport. He recalled how she showed up to Congress in a designer suit, threw out that infamous line, "What difference at this point does it make?" and expected the world to move on. But Rogan wasn't having it. He called that moment one of the coldest displays of political deflection ever broadcast. Behind the polished soundbite was a complete failure of leadership. Warnings were ignored. Security requests were denied. And when everything fell apart, the story changed. Again and again. Rogan pointed out how the media played defense, spinning the tragedy as a bureaucratic misstep instead of the deadly lapse it truly was. Hillary, he said, turned the death of American diplomats into a PR fire drill, one she barely escaped from, reputation smoldering. He didn't call her incompetent. He called her calculated, cold, and disturbingly indifferent. And while Benghazi may have faded from the headlines, it never left people's minds, especially not Rogan's. But somehow, after all that, Hillary managed to rebrand. Again, after Benghazi, after the emails, after the donor scandals, you'd think Hillary would lay low. But nope, she hit the reset button again, this time as a global feminist icon. But Joe Rogan wasn't buying the makeover. He ripped into the double standards behind her image. She preaches women's rights in America, then cozies up to regimes that openly oppress women abroad. One minute she's hashtagging number Believe Women, the next she's defending the man accused of abusing them, her husband. Rogan called it out. You can't claim to be a champion for victims while being married to the alleged predator-in-chief. And her so-called global diplomacy? Rogan compared it to influencer marketing, posing for photos, talking equality, then making oil deals behind the curtain. It wasn't leadership. It was optics. Her feminist brand, he said, wasn't about women. It was about power. Whatever narrative kept her relevant, that's what she pushed. One day it's glass ceilings. The next, it's climate change. The next, it's Russia hacked my destiny. But as Rogan pointed out, this rebranding wasn't fooling anyone anymore, because the real test came in 2016. And that campaign, it exposed everything. Joe Rogan saved some of his harshest words for Hillary's 2016 campaign, a billion-dollar disaster that somehow lost to a political outsider with zero experience and a Twitter account. Rogan didn't blame the voters. He blamed the machine behind Hillary, the carefully scripted speeches, the empty stadiums, the robotic delivery, the smug certainty that the White House was already hers. He called it the most artificial campaign in modern history. Everything about her felt manufactured, like a political hologram flickering on stage, glitching every time she tried to act relatable. Remember the hot sauce in the purse, the awkward dance moves, the bizarre, forced laughter? Rogan mocked it all. But more than that, he said her loss was a referendum, not just on her, but on the entire political establishment. The polls were fake, the media coverage was rigged, and the result was a meltdown no one in DC saw coming. And yet, even after all that, she didn't disappear. She doubled down, because for Hillary Clinton, defeat wasn't the end. It was just the start of her next reinvention. After losing the most winnable election in modern history, Hillary could have faded into the background. But instead, she launched what Rogan called the most tone-deaf comeback tour politics has ever seen. Podcasts, book signings, university lectures, masterclasses. Yes, she literally taught how to be president, after failing to become one. And the blame game? Still going. Rogan mocked how she pointed fingers in every direction. Russia, James Comey, the patriarchy, even Bernie Sanders. Everyone was guilty, except her. The woman who outspent Trump had the media in her pocket and still lost the Electoral College, blamed the weather, the voters, the vibes, anything but her campaign. Rogan compared it to a canceled TV show that keeps trying to reboot itself with worse writing every season. And just like those doomed reboots, the audience keeps shrinking. Her social media posts feel forced, her appearances feel rehearsed, and her desperate attempts to stay relevant reek of someone who can't accept that the spotlight moved on. But Hillary doesn't seem to care, because even in irrelevance, she's still rewriting her own story. Joe Rogan didn't just criticize Hillary Clinton, he delivered the eulogy for her political legacy. Calm, blunt, and brutally honest. He painted her as the ghost of campaigns past, haunting interviews, clinging to microphones, forever trying to rewrite a story that ended years ago. She's not leading a movement. She's curating a myth. One podcast appearance at a time, one carefully worded tweet, one awkward masterclass. But the audience, they've moved on. Rogan's final metaphor, Hillary is like a software update no one asked for, constantly popping up, promising improvement, but crashing the system every time. Her political brand, glitched. Her comeback, DOA. What once looked like ambition now feels like delusion. What once passed for power now reads as performance. And as Rogan made crystal clear, no amount of PR spin, podcast bookings, or legacy rewrites can change one brutal truth. She lost. And America isn't logging back in.